guys, I'm back and we continue to read from my book Alone, Growing Up in Alexandra. And today I would like us to start with chapter 9. And chapter 9 is aptly titled Bankrupt. But before that, just to wrap up chapter 8, you will recall in the last episode, the last video, I spoke of how Mr. Brian Strang wanted to, save me from myself because he could see the signs of a business that is going under, which is a norm in entrepreneurship. Usually businesses by the third year, you either scale up or you go down on the fourth year, because mine went down on the fourth year. But the troubles began on the third year, and the telltale signs were there. The fact that my margins were so low and that I had no operational capital and I had no investor or had an uncle or a friend or anyone who had money, I could not be salvageable. And I say this because many, many years ago, around that time that I was running office furniture, many, many years ago, around the time that I was running office furniture, that the Raymond Ackerman had started his entrepreneurship academy, the one that's linked to UJ. But at the time, it wasn't linked to UJ yet. They still ran it from Pick and Pay. And I was invited because, I was on someone's vendor list or someone's database. I was invited to go attend the entrepreneurial workshop or something. And that the Raymond Ackerman himself was there. And he first gave a very moving talk of, how Pick and Pay started. And he gave, the speech based on his book. I don't remember the name of the book, but I do remember that the cover of the book had three-legged tables, and he would explain that, in business, you need your accountant and your lawyer the most, and he would unpack why, because the accountant will help you with the finances, and the lawyer will obviously help you with the mitigation. And when you're getting summons left, right, and center, which is what I received. And there's a passage I will read from my book about me and attorneys and why lawyers to this day, in as much as I understand that we need them. In fact, I am talking to a lot of lawyers this time around. But in as much as I know that attorneys are needed, I really don't like the law fraternity. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I just feel that it's yeah, we could do without if we were sober enough as a humanity, if we were conscious enough, there would be no need for lawyers. But anyway, that's story for another day. So on that day, Raymond Ackerman, after his speech, he obviously had there were a session for comments and questions, and people raised their hands and asked questions. And I remember because I was going through the most at the time. And my question was obviously layered with my desperation and my issues. And I spoke about capital injection, that, we need money. Hey, washawaqima. The banks, don't give us enough money. They give us small overdrafts. Like I was just running on and on, which reflected obviously my issues. And during lunch, believe it or not, during lunch, Dr. Raymond Ackerman asked for some of us who were there, and he asked for me specifically, to have a one-on-one kind of talk with. And I remember in my head, I was like, yo, I'm sure he'll give me money. Maybe he had me and he's gonna write me a 50,000, 100,000 check. Oh my goodness. And then he, asked me a few questions. What do you do? I told him I'm in office furniture, and he's like, oh, that's a lucrative business. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not doing well. My margins are low, blah, blah, blah. So I explained the competition. We're competing with big firms like Bosisselness and all that. And he's like, how low are your margins? And I'm like, I'm hovering around 10, 12%. And he's like, that's not bad. And he went on to tell me something that I, it just opened my eyes, but for that moment. And then obviously when you are stuck in your own problems, that light bulb moment did not carry me to change anything. He said, at Pick and Pay and in most retails, our margins are very, very low. And he said something along the lines of, it would be if we make 1 rand or 2 rand on an item, especially grocery item, then we are killing it. And he spoke of how volume, obviously, I mean, retail is a completely different business to the one that I was in. But essentially, what he was trying to say to me is that try and have terms with your suppliers, because essentially he was saying the reason they could sustain is because they have long term they have long contracts or long credit terms with their suppliers. To make an example, and this is not necessarily from him, but to make an example, This coup, for an example, coup, the one that's, yeah, coup. A relationship with coup would be 120, 90 to 120 credit line instead of 7 days like me or COD like me. So that credit line, that length of time helps them take some of the profit, the little profit from the margin, but also the money, the supplier's money, put it in a bank and let it grow type of thing. I think someone knows what I'm talking about. And then they make money from the supplier's money. And so he was trying to advise me to say, you've been working, this is the third year, they know you. Try and ask for long, like ask for time. Because when you don't have time, when you don't have money, you need time. And he went on, I mean, I'm getting a lump in my throat because he went on to say, you could turn this around, Lebo, and you have a strong heart. And, something along the lines of your heart is in the right place. And I remember leaving there feeling like, yeah, maybe I should do that. But I was so deep. Sometimes it is too late. Sometimes you get the best advice a little bit late because I was already in so much trouble. I was already starting to duck calls. I would know that, my God, if a phone rings, I know it's a supplier who's following up on their money, or it would be a client, a customer who's following up on their delivery, which I have not delivered yet. Because what would start to happen is that because you're not paying the people that are supplying you with chairs or with desking or with fabric or with whatever it is, they're now not supplying. They're not supplying you. They're not honoring your latest orders, no matter how big they are. They're not honoring your latest orders until you pay that 50K or that 60K or whatever you owe. And now, Mr. Client, Tikamo, Department of whatever, RAF, Rand Water, or whoever is like, bro, it's been 3 weeks. Where's our furniture? Where's this? Leading to order cancelled. I mean, it became a big mess. So you ducking calls, you're living in fear, you're living in anxiety. And then it gets too personal, where now your car is being wanted because you're also not paying proper. Like it is a very, very traumatizing and traumatic space to be in, and people, entrepreneurs who have walked this path know exactly what I'm talking about. So going bankrupt is not a walk in the park. And it's very unique because not many have experienced it. A lot of people have experienced losing a job, getting retrenched, and not having an income. But losing a business and owing everybody in terms of suppliers and the bank and for your car and for your house, yeah, that is something that very few of us, especially here, especially Black South Africans, have experienced. And those of us who've experienced it do not really talk about it. Or when they talk about it, we don't get into details. But it is it's only until recently where I can stomach and knock at the door. There was a time where anyone who knocks at the door, it didn't matter where I lived, it would just bring up those memories of attorneys. I mean, not attorneys, sheriff, knocking at my door, dropping a summons, attaching my furniture. Ah, yeah. Those were really, really, really tough times. And mind you, how old am I? I'm 29. 28, 29, and I'm going through all of that. So the passage I'm going to read now is the passage, the one about the attorneys. And I think the next video I will then do a special video on me and the sheriff, Mr. Duplessis, because you read that deserves its own video without mixing it with this one. And I want to read the passage about me and the attorney, and just to explain also how naive I was, how I didn't know a lot of things. I might have been streetwise, charming, sales savvy, ambitious, and knowing, but I didn't know, I didn't have a lot of grounding. I didn't know a lot of things about how business actually works. Back to that video that I did a few months ago, that just because you're a great salesperson, that doesn't make you a great business person. And that might not make you a great business person ever. You might just be good at sales and stakeholder relations and good relationships, but the whole business of business, yeah, one might have to have a CEO run it while you run with maybe chairpersonship or whatever it is, or just be a stakeholder relations person and not get into the nitty-gritties of the business and all that. So let me read that passage and maybe talk a little bit to it and then wrap it up and, shut it down. Okay, let me put my glasses. All right. Where do I want to start? Where do I want to start? Yeah. The summons started pouring in at least one every 2 weeks or so. I then learned the harsh realities of law and lawyers. One day I received a summons that was to attach my furniture or everything of value in me. For whatever reason, guys, I looked at where the summons is coming from and I saw the address of the attorneys and I decided to go visit the attorney's office to try and explain my situation. This is naivety, not knowing that the lawyers represent the client and they have nothing to do with you. You have no business coming to see them. I didn't know that at the time. You know, I I decided to visit the attorney's office and try to explain my situation. I was faced with an unfeeling, uncompromising female attorney who was so cold and so unkind. And I thought that she was so cold and so unkind at the time. But this is someone who has a job and he has a client that says, go get my money from that. She has no business being kind and nice to me. And she was genuinely startled by my visit because, like, what am I doing? I I did not know that that's not done. Yeah. For her only interest was that of a client and the money I owed, because I remember she was actually quite cold. Okay, let me not talk race. She was so genuinely startled by this visit and she was perplexed. And, she told me to get out of her office. She has nothing to do with me. If I'm going to be in business, I need to honor payments. I need to pay her client, and get the hell out of my office. I got emotional, and I think I just said the most vile things. I was just desperate. Let me see what I wrote. I tried to reason with her to no avail. I resorted to an emotional tantrum. I threw such a big tantrum that I still cringe when I think about that day. But I was desperate. I was very, very desperate, and I'm gonna stop it here. And yeah, I mean, I really had no idea that that's not done. I just thought that, I would go and I would explain, and the lawyer would say, okay, fine, how would you do this and this and that? But it was too late. By the time you get a summoned, there is nothing much that could be done. It's either you pay or they attach whatever value that they would attach. And then, my friends, that was the beginning of a terrible, terrible downward spiral. Now, next week or the next video, I'm going to tell you about me and the sheriff. Mr. Du Plessis and his advice. I mean, I would always get these white men to advise me somehow, because there was another white man who also tried to help me, who was a client. And still, I couldn't hear it. So I'll read about it because with the sheriff, he was warning me about my house, that if I don't change something fast, I'm going to lose my house. And I did lose my house. But that is story for another video. And for now, this is my story. I cannot wait to hear yours.